Suzanne, good to see you as well. And thanks to the Bay of Quinte Chambers, all three of them, for making this happen today. It's nice to see some familiar faces on my Zoom screen, and I've had a bit of a whirlwind week, maybe 2 weeks. Well, probably more like 3 or 4 weeks, actually, on the energy file. There's been a lot of things happening. As many of you know, I am the Minister of Energy, as well as being the MPP for the Bay of Quinte. I was experiencing a bit of jet lag until about last night. That's probably the best sleep that I've had in a while. I flew out from Pearson during the Thanksgiving weekend on a trip that led me to Finland for a couple of days. I was in the Czech Republic for a couple of days, Poland for about 24 hours, and then concluded in Estonia in the Baltics for 3 days this past weekend. And since coming home, I have had the time to experience some jet lag and a bit of a nap from here or there, but expending whatever energy I had with Tanya, seeing Bryan Adams live in Peterborough on Tuesday night. So it was probably the sleepiest I've ever been at a rock concert. And then we hit the road again this morning. I'm in Ottawa right now, in the nation's capital, in my colleague Lisa McLeod's constituency office, and I'm preparing for a keynote speech at noon today at the Canadian Nuclear Finance Summit. So that's why I have to depart a little bit early just to make my way downtown to the Westin for that important summit on financing new nuclear projects. And I am going to do my best to get back home tonight for the Quinte Business Achievement Awards. It's an event that I always love to go to, celebrating the great accomplishments of our small businesses across the Quinte region, and it's always a lot of fun. And so hopefully I can get back there as soon as I can. We can't stop this thing we've started, to quote Bryan Adams. This thing that we're talking about is helping the world find more energy autonomy. It's what I've been focused on for the last couple of weeks in the trade mission that I was just on, and also positioning Ontario and Canada as a leader and a conduit to that future energy autonomy. While we took some time to study the deep pit in Onkalo, which is in Finland, at the start of my recent trip, the majority of it was spent in meetings discussing small modular nuclear reactors, and they can be built, the components can, in a factory in Ontario and then shipped around the world, unlike a conventional reactor. These small modular reactors offer flexibility, and they offer a smaller footprint as well and less waste. And the technology is scalable, so you can add extra supply as the demand increases. One of these SMRs that we're talking about deploying at Darlington is a 300 megawatt small modular reactor that could power a city the size of London, so about 300,000 people. And through our partnership with Ontario Power Generation and GE Hitachi, which is the technology that we've chosen, our province is considered a first mover, and we've become a primary supplier of this technology. And I walked away with Europe with memorandums of understanding this past week for other countries to purchase our reactors. And when you think about that, for someone like Poland or Estonia, they can reduce their reliance on Russian natural gas or Russian energy, and that can only help their affordability and economic development potential at a time when the world is looking for alternatives. Just one unique story from Poland. Because of their worries about the reliance on Russian natural gas this winter, they've actually allowed their residents to burn lignite, which is in their homes, which is one of the most it's the dirtiest forms of coal. So as they're trying to clean up their emissions, at the same time, they're allowing residents, because of the energy security issues there, to burn lignite in their homes. We're interested in next generation nuclear because it powers over 60% of the generation on our grid, and it's clean, it's emissions-free power. And we need that as we look to meet our targets moving forward with the anticipated new demand due to growth and electric vehicle production and use in the province. And then imagine the benefits that Ontario can experience by producing that technology as we build at the Darlington nuclear site. There's good jobs, and there's going to be economic spin-offs, and maybe economic spin-offs in the Quinte region as well. I recently visited Mike Boyd over at Triangle Fluid Controls in the Belleville Industrial Park, and potentially his valves that he's building there could fit the specs for the new GE Hitachi model. And perhaps there's other manufacturers that could be engaged as we continue to build out the supply chain for this next generation nuclear build. And there could be many, many impacts on our region, particularly in businesses that employ fewer than 100 employees. And that's what we're celebrating here today is a Small Business Week. So we've seen the success of a similar model in our automotive sector, and I know there are many that are benefiting in the Quinte region with the Driving Prosperity Plan that I was able to roll out when I was the Minister of Economic Development, and Minister Vic Fedeli has championed over the last couple of years. And our province has been working with the federal government. We're leveraging record investments in EV production. So new EV mandates at our OEMs, our manufacturers, battery technologies and recycling. And the latest news is that a $1.5 billion investment by a company called Umicore is going to be producing battery components in Loyalist Township. So not too far from home, just a little bit east on the 401. And the more that we can innovate and that we can stay ahead of these global trends, it really does help our growth and prosperity options in the Quinte region as well. During the spring, our government committed its re-election efforts to building key infrastructure and creating good jobs as we're emerging from the pandemic. And we're fortunate that we did receive a large mandate from the people of Ontario. We have 83 seats in the legislature and a real convincing mandate to move forward on our priorities. And those priorities are central to everything that we do in government. And what we want to do is help our small and medium-sized businesses. We know that Metrolinx and the Toronto Board of Trade estimate that there's over $11 billion in lost productivity due to gridlock in the GTA in particular. And that's why we're building and improving highway links, not just in the GTA, but right across the province. And these investments are going to help as we build supply chains in Ontario. And Premier Ford's been a huge advocate of that through the Ontario Together promotions. There's been a number of local companies that have benefited from Ontario Together, including Global Med over in Quinte West. They were able to increase their production of medical tubing to supply not just our domestic markets, but also countries around the world with medical tubing that's really been in supply, or in demand, I should say, because of the pandemic. Local officials, including those at the Chamber, have also alerted us to the need for a wider 401 through Quinte with safe and dedicated off-ramps, including the Bear, that Belleville East arterial route that we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And we placed that in our plan with the Ministry of Transportation as well. In recent weeks, I've also talked to Picton Terminals down in Prince Edward County about how nimble Great Lakes port operators like Picton Terminals might be able to help get product to the front lines more quickly instead of sitting on docks in Montreal or in Vancouver or Halifax. And the necessary approvals for making Picton Terminals part of the solution would have to come from the federal level primarily, but it would be valuable to support our Made in Ontario solutions for businesses as well. And we also know that an increasing number of Quinte businesses interact with customers locally and farther afield on the internet. So it's imperative that we have reliable broadband. It's not a nice to have anymore. It's a must for small businesses in our region. And that's why we're investing, our government alone in Ontario is investing over $4 billion to ensure that high-speed internet reaches almost every single home and business by 2025. And building on existing networks like the EORN, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network fiber backbone, we've worked with reverse auctions over the last several months to attract big players and small players to take us to the next step in making sure that we get to that last mile so that everyone in the province is able to participate. And these auctions will ensure that in the bidding process, they're addressing areas of high needs first in order to access funds for their projects. Through everything, we're also cognizant, I should say. We're very aware of our first mandate that we must find ways to reduce red tape and create an environment where businesses can thrive. And I know that during the pandemic, we launched a series of cash flow supports and rebates to help through the tough times. The federal government did as well. And we're going to continue to seek ways to make life more affordable, which of course is another plank in our campaign and something that I've been very focused on at the Ministry of Energy. And you'll also know that Ontario continues to support initiatives like Digital Main Street, helping you increase your footprint electronically, and that's where internet becomes so imperative. The small business centers are there for advice, and the chambers are as well, and initiatives like Futurepreneur and the new career training in schools that give youth an eye toward a lifetime of generating business and employment are so important. Financial incentives like the Eastern Ontario Development Fund can also assist with growth as we start seeing demand increase again, post-pandemic. And we all know that that inflation is out there, and besides the rising cost of inflation and energy bills and the rough state of supply chains, one of the biggest challenges that I hear day to day is staffing, and I'm sure you on the line are hearing the same thing. Here in Bay of Quinte, we've got about 3,000 vacant jobs that we can't fill, and this isn't specific to Quinte by any means. It's a global phenomenon with baby boomers reaching retirement age, and also sped up by the pandemic. So we're really banking on training people to enter the workforce and find better paying jobs. And a major vehicle for that is the Skills Development Fund, which offers on-the-job training. You might recognize it as the Elevate Plus program for manufacturing or food processing. The Enrichment Center has the GIFT program, which we've recently supported for vulnerable peoples, or the Quinte Immigration Supports for new workers. In the county, there's programs tied into the culinary industry, and across the region, the Quinte Home Builders Association are promoting skilled trades as well. So there have been a number of investments made in skills development funds for our region and right across the province. And these integrated programs offer the skills training necessary, but they're also considering the wraparound and community supports that help overcome barriers. So those who seek work can progress off social services roles toward dignified employment too. And those who are already employed can progress into leadership roles or to entrepreneurship. We've also revamped our Better Jobs Ontario, which was formerly known as a Second Career, to provide new opportunities for retraining and introducing training tax credits to encourage more to get involved in work. Our region is very fortunate to have Loyalist College partnering with local businesses as well, and they adapt for our needs. And it's no secret why graduate and employer satisfaction rates are so high here. Our government continues to be close partners with Loyalist, which, as you probably heard, experienced its largest enrollment ever this past September. So Loyalist College is such an important part of our community and providing the workforce that we all need. And I know that business operators have been looking to my office to learn about tax policy and grants or regulations that affect your bottom line, but there's more we do provincially that affects your ability to attract and retain employees. And of course, those employees are the ones that shop and they pay taxes that allow us to fund social programs like health and education. And we're really pleased to focus on people in this term too, by making investments in hospitals and long-term care homes, both operationally and in capital upgrades and builds to increase capacity and improve care. And by looking at ways to attract more doctors, which is a huge issue locally, and improve nurse practitioner spaces, we're ensuring that our health system is going to be there when we need it the most. And we've also supplied COVID-19 sick days paid by the province, not the employer, to help many employees through this time. We're building a couple of new schools in the region, East Hill in Belleville, St. Gregory's in Picton, making significant additions as well to Murray Centennial over in Quinte West and St. Joseph's in Belleville, and investing in new technology for our youth at our schools as well. And we are changing the provincial policy statement to support housing at all levels, including affordable units, and funding local service providers to build new supportive housing and add programming that assists with mental health and addictions. And there's going to be more to come on the housing front in the next couple of weeks too, as the legislature resumes sitting next week. So all of this builds resiliency and reinforces that we're here to help you to do what you all do best. My background is from working in a small business, and I know how adaptive you've all been over the past few years in dealing with the pandemic. And I just want to say congratulations to everybody in the Bay of Quinte community. It's through your businesses and your participation and generosity. We have one of the best places to live in all of Ontario and the country. And some dream of a better community, some go to work and make it happen. And that's why we're celebrating Small Business Week this week. So thanks for inviting me to participate again in the Small Business Week events. And I look forward to seeing most of you, hopefully, at the awards tonight. But I'm happy to take any questions that you might have at this time. Turn it back to you, Jill.
Okay,
Suzanne.
thanks so much, Todd. And I know Suzanne's going to moderate the questions that are showing up in the Q&A, so there are a couple. I guess my one question overriding everything is we are starting to hear some rumblings of concerns around COVID spread again. Anything from the provincial office there that tells us what you think is going to happen?
Well, I know that Dr. Kieran Moore, our Chief Medical Officer of Health, was out last Friday with an update for the public. And we're looking forward as Cabinet to getting an update from him next week at our Cabinet meetings as we resume in person at the legislature. I know he did talk about the fact that he would consider, if necessary, a remasking policy. That's something that would have to go through Cabinet for discussion first. But I think at this time, and as we made decisions in 2020 and 2021, we were relying on the best advice we had from health officials, but also keeping a close eye on our hospital capacity. That was what was really driving the decisions that were being made. We've obviously invested a great deal in new beds, and there's new policies in place now, plus high vaccination levels in our province compared to many other jurisdictions. We've been leading the way when it comes to vaccination levels. I think we've put a lot of those pieces in place so that we won't ever have to experience the type of lockdowns that we experienced in the past, but there could potentially be more advice coming on things like masking. And he did suggest last week, and while I was overseas, I think at that time in Poland, watching his news conference, he did suggest that, if you don't feel comfortable, wear a mask, but so far there haven't been any new mandates. But it's an evolving situation. We're looking forward to getting an update on him, from him, I should say, on any new mutations of COVID that may be out there. And I know that numbers are on the rise a bit in the local community as we all head back inside more than we have been over the summer months, but an evolving situation.
As always, I'll turn it over to Suzanne.
Yeah, hi, Todd. One of the questions I had for you is around the efforts that the government has been making to get the government services online, to make them easier, to avoid backlogs. Do you want to just give us a little update on the success of that and how businesses can find those supports that they need and the access, the licenses and the other information that they need without having to go down to an office?
Yeah, so this is all part of the Red Tape Reduction Ministry, which is now led by my colleague Parm Gill, in collaboration with my other colleague, Khalid Rashid, who's responsible for what used to be Government and Consumer Services, and I'm still not familiar entirely with the name of the new ministry, but he heads that up, and it's all about providing services digitally to residents of Ontario. But as we always like to say, digital first, not digital only, because we know there are challenges out there for and not to paint all seniors as struggling with technology, but many don't have access to the technology that some of the younger folks do. We want to make sure that there still are opportunities for people to go to their local Service Ontario and get the permitting that they might need, or renew their license or whatever it might be in person at a kiosk. But at the same time, we've been rolling out a lot of new digital strategies on how people can get the permitting that they might need or renew their licenses and those types of things. So much of it is available now at Service Ontario online. The one thing that maybe has reared its head a little bit as a problem with this is that, while we did rebate people's driver's licenses plate sticker fees, and everybody would have been receiving those earlier this year. There seems to be a bit of a complacency from people when it comes to renewing their license plates. You still have to renew your license plates, even though you don't have to pay for them anymore. And a Belleville police officer or a local member of the OPP will probably remind you of that as you're driving down the road with a sticker on your license plate that is out of date. You do have to continue to renew your license plate stickers, even though you no longer have to pay the fee for them. And that can all be done online. So it's very simple. We've tried to simplify things as much as we can. And that goes for, other permits as well. So we're continuing to roll out new digital strategies and way to provide services online that's much more efficient and make life easier, so you don't have to stand in line for 3 hours or even an hour or even 20 minutes at a Service Ontario office.
Yeah, and I know there's been some work done to make more and more of those business compliance documents available online as well. And we all know that if you own your own business, you may be dealing with an issue at 11 o'clock at night. So it's great that they can access those services off regular business hours as well. So very good. So we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. So one of them is actually around the funding for healthcare and around PSW wages. Are they still being supplemented? And this question is sort of asking, is there a chance that could be supplemented for private ones, not just the publicly funded ones?
So there is an increase that passed legislation. It's a $3 an hour increase for personal support workers. There's been a couple of different rounds of pandemic pay that have come out during the pandemic for nurses and for PSWs as well. And then the permanent increase to PSW pay that took part, I can't remember exactly when that was, but I believe it was in the spring. Not being the Minister of Health, I'm not exactly sure about any future increases, but negotiations are underway when it comes to many of those folks in the public sector. Of course, education workers are top of mind right now, making the news, and they're currently negotiating with the Ministry of Education on new contracts. I believe there will be negotiations with nurses coming up in the very near future. They've gone through their restraint period, if you want to call it that, with Bill 124 and the 1% wage increases for their 3 years. So they've gone through that period of restraint, and now they'll be back to bargaining collectively with the government in the very near future. And nurses have also received the retention pay, which was a significant funding announcement that was actually made in Belleville at Bayshore, north of the 401 on Millennium Parkway back in the spring as well. But they'll be resuming their negotiations as well. So there will be an opportunity for them to negotiate pay increases with the government, because they have gone through their so-called restraint period with Bill 124.
Okay, I got one more related question to that, and then we've got a couple of energy questions for you. So I'm sure you'll be excited about that, because I know you're living and breathing all about energy these days. Again, just around those personal support workers, do you know the status of that industry being regulated? Is that something the government is looking at?
Yeah, we are actually, and that was a decision that was made, I believe, in the spring as well. We've been talking about that for quite some time. And of course, long-term care facilities are regulated and inspected by the province. And we've also, on that file, we've committed to the 4 hours of care per day per person in long-term care, which is something that had been talked about for a long time, and we're moving toward that additional funding for that as well. Also on the health file, there's been so much happening on the health file. It's hard for me to keep track of it, because I have been focused on on energy for the most part over the last couple of weeks in particular, with big announcements on that file, and I look forward to those questions. But there have been big changes that have been made to address the primary care shortage, and there's more to come on that file as well. Allowing for doctors with foreign credentials to be recognized in our province and in our country, but particularly in our province, and working with the College of Physicians and Surgeons on ensuring that more and more individuals can help fill the backlog that exists there. There are so many people, particularly in our region, that don't have a primary care physician right now, and doctors with foreign credentials and additional nurse practitioners will help to be able to resolve that issue.
Okay, so this next question is, can you confirm if there is talk about encouraging or mandating new solar systems in the OBC for new homes to help offset the EV charger loads that are inevitable? Seems like having non-centralized distribution is the only way, as hydro is stretched as it is.
So we've made a number of changes already when it comes to solar programs and allowing them to participate. Also distributed energy resources, community net metering. We've allowed for a couple of different projects to occur there. So solar will be a part of our future, and we've allowed for small businesses, homeowners, and farmers to take advantage of solar in their production of electricity locally as well. So yes, solar is gonna play a role. I just announced last week or 2 weeks ago a major directive to the independent electricity system operator to procure new energy resources in the province. And 4,000 megawatts is a significant amount. It's the largest battery storage procurement in the province's history, and that will potentially include hybrid systems as well, which would couple a battery storage facility with solar or wind potentially. The difficulty with wind and solar participating with the ISO in our competitive procurements is that they can't guarantee that they can distribute energy for 4 hours. If the clouds blow over, like we've seen the last couple of days, or if the wind stops blowing, then they can't provide the electricity unless they're paired up with a battery storage facility, which is why these hybrid systems, I think, are going to be an important part of our electricity grid going forward. So there's a lot happening on this front. Of course, we most recently announced that we were investing in new conservation and demand management programs. As the independent electricity system operator likes to say, the cheapest power plant is the one you don't have to build, because you're conserving energy, you're conserving electricity. And so we just expanded our conservation and demand management programs at the ministry as well, and at the ISO, for community buildings and individuals to access solar panels for their homes, distributed energy resources, hybrid heat pumps. All these kinds of things are available to businesses, community members, and individuals too.
Just to add to that, is this something that you as the Minister of Energy are really concerned about, with the popularity of electric vehicles growing? And I know that even here in Quinte West, there's quite a few places now that you can charge up your electric vehicle. Is the demand of electric vehicles on the overall grid, is this something that is a big concern, or how would you rank the level of concern on a scale of 1 to 10?
It's so tough to know, and that's what makes electricity planning so difficult. The independent electricity system operator is tasked with trying to determine how many megawatts we're going to need going forward, and it depends. And you don't want to procure too much electricity in case we don't see the uptake in electric vehicles that many people are predicting. And certainly we've been able to attract new electricity powered vehicle mandates in our province. So General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, Chrysler, they've all made announcements to go and produce electric vehicles here in Ontario. One of the things that we're seeing, though, is because of the slowdowns in the supply chain, is that if you want an electric vehicle these days, you better get your name in early and expect to be on a waiting list for 4 to 6 months or longer in some cases because of the challenges of the supply chain. So it's very difficult to be able to predict with any certainty how many megawatts we're going to need by a certain date. But there certainly is a move to electrification, not just in the EV space, but also in manufacturing. We have 2 of our 3 largest steel plants in Ontario that have made a decision to go from their coal-fired powered steel manufacturing processes to electric arc furnaces, which are going to require an enormous amount of electricity. So we're planning on those new arc furnaces being in place in the 27-28 timeframe, which means we need to ensure we have the power for those facilities. At the same time, we're watching how electric vehicle uptake continues to happen. And there's a lot of planning that's going along with that. One of the things that we recently ordered the Ontario Energy Board to do was to come up with an ultra low overnight rate. One of the challenges, and anybody who's in manufacturing that's on the line knows the challenges of watching for the peak, particularly in the summertime. If you have thousands and thousands of electric vehicles that are coming online over the next number of years, you don't want those homeowners plugging in during the day and charging their vehicles during the day. We would prefer that that happen overnight, and that's why we've come out or will be coming out very shortly with an ultra low overnight rate. You'll have to do the math yourself on whether that's something that you want to take part in, but you'll be able to get a rate of about 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour overnight to charge your EV, and many of them are programmable, so you can sleep while that's happening, and then you would pay slightly more during the day if you chose to be a part of that. But one of the things we heard loud and clear at the Ministry of Energy was that individuals and businesses wanted more choice when it came to electricity and electricity rates, and that's why we're moving forward with that one. But yeah, there's been a lot of challenges, certainly in ensuring that we have the power that we need as part of that 4,000 megawatt procurement that we just announced a couple of weeks ago. Just prior to that, we announced as well that we were extending the Pickering nuclear facility, one of our 3 nuclear facilities in the province, to the fall of 2026, and potentially refurbishing Pickering as well, because it does provide clean, non-emitting, reliable, safe, and affordable power for our province and employs thousands of people in the Pickering area and in the supply chain as well. So there's been a lot happening over the last 4 weeks when it comes to announcements on the energy file, and a lot of planning that's taking place in conjunction with the independent electricity system operator.
Perfect. You've actually answered the next question, which was, talking about the official closure of the Pickering nuclear plant and the increase in population. Did the government have a backup plan to meet such gap shortfalls? But it sounds like you've got a few different irons in the fire that you're trying to be ready to go in a bunch of different directions as needed.
Yeah, the other positive thing, I guess, when it comes to the nuclear file in particular, is that refurbishments are underway of our nuclear facilities at Darlington and Bruce Power. And we've learned a lot through the first refurbishments, and the continuance of those refurbishments has been going extremely well. So those projects are ahead of schedule and on budget, or even exceeding budget expectations, which is great news, because that will also close that gap that could potentially be coming in 25, 26, if we see the electrification that we expect to see in the province. Because of the success in getting a new investment to the province. And, I think I've mentioned a few times when I've been on with you folks with the chamber, my first week on the job at Economic and Development as the minister there, I received the phone call from General Motors telling me that after 100 years, they were going to be closing the Oshawa plant. which was devastating. And they all said it was nothing that our government had done. This was in the first year of our mandate, but electricity rates were through the roof and unpredictable. And there were other challenges as well. And to be able to turn that around, like we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, to get those electric vehicle mandates, the EV battery manufacturing facility that I mentioned earlier coming into Loyalist Township, another enormous one, a $5 billion investment in Windsor. Those facilities are also going to require a lot of electricity. So it's imperative that our nuclear facilities, including Pickering, are there for us long term. And we're going to be able to rely on the refurbishments at Darlington and Bruce for another 30 years, potentially Pickering as well, once we get the feasibility study back on extending that facility as well, and all of the good paying jobs that are in that sector. 76,000 people in Ontario work in our nuclear sector. So it's very important that Pickering continue to operate.
Very good. I'm going to take the next one. And I have to say, I saw the announcement regarding the 13 million announced for training. The challenge is that it's union-based, and we have a lot of small independent shops that already compete for wages and employees with regard to that in the apprenticeship sector. So is there any opportunity for some of that funding to extend beyond the union shop? Because we've always felt kind of within the network that this is actually what's prohibited entry into the trade sector for a long time.
So yeah, some of it is union based, some of it isn't. The Skills Development Fund is meant to be as nimble as possible, and that's why we've rolled out funding to local organizations like the Quinte Home Builders Association, Quinte Immigrant Services, even folks at the Waring House and Loyalist College around the culinary program, training people for culinary jobs. There have been the Business Development Council, Quinte Economic Development Commission, and the Elevate Plus program. I can't keep track of all of the funding announcements that we've made for Skills Development Fund.
This is specifically with regard to electrical apprentices. That's linked to the IBEW training program. So these incentives provide $1,000 per level of training completed, but it's only if they're accessing it to enter the union. So a non-union shop can't access this to help with the training of apprentices in their shop.
And I think this might actually be federal funding.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that further just to make sure. I know that one of the things that has happened over the last little while is that we've tried to diversify support to as many different areas as we possibly could, supporting the union training shops and our college programs as well, with funding, and local organizations as well that are involved in providing training services. So, I'm a huge supporter of Loyalist College and what's happening there. I know we have announced a number of different skills training programs that impact Loyalist, but there's also programs that are working with partners like the Electrical Brotherhood based out of Kingston. So we've tried to diversify training as much as we can. The bottom line is, we need workers, we need employees. I was just talking with Adam, my staff member who's with me here today in Ottawa on the way up, about the refurbishment projects that are underway at the nuclear facilities, but also the new small modular reactor program that's being rolled out and will soon be using workers. And then now the Pickering facility, plus all of the other infrastructure programs that we have rolling out, be it subways in Toronto or long-term care facilities and hospitals and schools across the province. We just need more people to get into the skilled trades. And I know Minister Lecce with education has been working on implementing exposure to skilled trades earlier in grade 9 in schools instead of in grade 11 and 12. But there's a lot more that we can do on training. So we can discuss this further for sure.
Okay, that's good, because I'm just thinking this is a new policy resolution to ensure that all people who are involved with apprenticeships and supporting apprentices in their roles would have access to this kind of funding. But a completely other question now. So roundabouts. We have Peter, who's a strong advocate of roundabouts, and he's noting Belleville specifically in this question, but he wonders whether or not there's an opportunity for the Ontario government to support this through the Ministry of Transportation or something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there have been a number of different roundabout projects that have been approved by the government. We're currently looking at one in Prince Edward County. And I had the opportunity last fall, I believe it was, to take Minister Caroline Mulrooney down to the county. We also did the Bear tour with her when she was in Belleville. One of the most dangerous intersections down in the county is at Schoharie Road, right at Huff Estates and Taste of Country. You know it well. And
you still live just down the road.
Yeah, just down the road. And one of the proposals that has come from Prince Edward County and from the OPP, actually, you know, Inspector Hatch, the detachment commander there, was with us that day, looking at the possibility of having a roundabout at that location. It just seems to make a lot of sense. We do already have the roundabout that works extremely well by the Waring House in Prince Edward County. We have the new roundabout in Thurlow. So these are happening. The province is definitely you know, not opposed and would be supportive of looking at opportunities like the one in Prince Edward County or any others that municipalities would bring forward to our attention. So, you know, whomever the council is next week, I'm sure they'll have priorities that they want to bring forward when it comes to new infrastructure. Roundabouts are a part of that. I'd be happy to take it to my colleagues in infrastructure and transportation to potentially support.
Certainly the one at the Bay Bridge and Highway 2 would be one opportunity. And I still think that the Highway 62 and Maitland Drive intersection would have benefited nicely from one. There's lots of space there for it, and getting stuck at that light is a challenge. Anyway, so I will say we have one more comment here with the increased use of nuclear energy. I see that there will be an increase in cost of handling the spent fuel nuclear waste after the uranium has been depleted and no longer available to be used for electricity production. Has the province factored in the cost of handling spent fuel?
Yeah, actually, and one of the beauties of the nuclear program is that when we negotiate the rate, it's set regularly in the regulated price plan. It includes the full cost of the project, from site preparation to decommissioning to dealing with the spent fuel. So that money has been collected by the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which actually is a federal body. I was just with them last week in Finland, as a matter of fact, touring the deep geological repository there. It's going to be the first facility in the world to store spent fuel rods. And it's expected to open in late 2023 or early 24. A fascinating tour. We drove 4.5 kilometers down into the ground. So 4.5 kilometers of driving into a rock, a big chunk of granite bedrock that is hundreds of millions of years old. And we were 500 meters below the surface by the time we got to the bottom. And that's where they're going to be storing the spent fuel rods. Obviously, it's a very expensive project, and it's something that we're looking to replicate in Canada. We're down to our last two communities, I should say, that are being considered as the site for this DGR, the Deep Geological Repository. But the Nuclear Waste Management Organization already has the funding for this project. They're just determining where the host community will be, and then rolling out the construction plan for it. So that's why last week in Finland was very educational, not just for me, but for the folks that are tasked with building this deep geological repository. Keep in mind that we've been operating nuclear facilities in Ontario since the 1970s. so 50 years. And that nuclear waste and the spent energy is currently being stored on the site at each of the facilities. So Pickering and Darlington and Bruce Power in safe storage and very, very professionally and safely. So we need a long-term solution for that. And this DGR is going to be that. And the funding is being collected by the federal government through the Nuclear Waste Management Organization.
Very good. I'm going to ask one last little question because it's kind of on my mind. The strong mayor powers, is that related specifically to housing? I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, well, yes, it is about housing, and it's only, and I think there's been some misinterpretation of this. It's just for Toronto and Ottawa at this time. Yeah, just for Toronto and Ottawa at this time. So that is where the bulk of housing is going to be built over the next 10 years. Minister Clark has talked about the fact that a third of Ontario's housing will be built in those two municipalities over the next 10 years. And so as I said earlier too, housing is a particular importance to our government. There have been 9 different pieces of legislation over the last 4+ years at the legislature, and there's more to come to encourage more housing to be built. The strong mayor powers are just one piece of the puzzle. And Minister Clark will say this every time he speaks. There's no silver bullet to speed up housing construction, but 9 pieces of legislation and more coming indicates that it's a priority for us, and we need to do more if we're going to hit the target of 1.5 million new homes by the end of the decade or in the next 10 years. Population growth is also expected to grow by about 2 million people in Ontario by the end of the decade. So we're at 15.5 million people in Ontario right now. By 2010, or 2020, I should say, 2030. By 2030, we should be at about 17.5 million people in Ontario, which is why it's so important not just to build housing, but also that infrastructure that we need when it comes to subways and new highways and highway expansions in the province.
Very good. I'll let Suzanne take it. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I know you want to leave here shortly. So Suzanne, if you have any final words.
I just wanted to let you know that I put the link in the chat about the new federal funding program around apprenticeship, and it's for organizations to apply to so that to help promote and face the challenges in our apprenticeship program. And I think, we all know that there's things that need to be dealt with, and I think there's a way of using that funding for non-unionized positions as well. So maybe locally we can look at trying to get a group together and get some of that funding applied for to put some kind of a program in place here in our region. And I think, just all together, it's still a challenging time for business. We just did a survey out to our members not too long ago, and over 60% of them had vacant positions. And the top issues here in our community were no different than what came to the top at the BDC survey they did across Canada. It's inflation, it's workforce, and it's supply chain. These continue to be big challenges for businesses. Is there anything the government is doing to make sure that businesses are getting the opportunity to get out of this, this recovery mode and be ready in case a recession does hit in the coming year?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing we can do is ensure that businesses stay open. And we've certainly made a lot of commitments when it comes to investment in our healthcare. There's still a lot more to do, and there will be more coming on that front as well. I think to your point, Suzanne, about federal funding for organizations as well, we are seeking proposals for private sector for skills development funding opportunities too. So while there have been a number of programs that have rolled out, there's still more that Minister McNaughton and his team are looking at. When it comes to fulfilling jobs, one of the things that we're also applying some pressure the federal government to do is extend the eligibility of hours for some of our newcomers to the community. Those workers that are there, and we saw many of them at a massive Diwali celebration in Belleville last weekend. I wasn't there, but Tanya was there with Reagan, and many people from the community were there. We have an enormous number of international students that are in our community right now that are limited to 20 hours a week because of the current federal regulations, and many of them want to work more than 20 hours and are able to work more than 20 hours. And so there's an opportunity there, I think, for the federal government to change that. And I know Minister McNaughton has been looking at that and talking to his federal counterpart, Minister Fraser.
Yeah, they upped it.
They did?
Yeah, it's up now to, it's the end of December 31, 2023. They've increased it to 24 hours. Yeah. So it's temporary. It's temporary.
Yeah. Next,
14 months. So that is a challenge for sure. But it's nice to know at least it's on their radar.
Yes, no, it definitely is. For the first time in a long time, a couple of weeks ago, I toured a large facility in Trenton, in Quinte West, and I think they're the first company in a long time to tell me that they have their human resources that they need. So, which is very rare. I understand that's rare. Most companies that I've talked to are still struggling with finding people. But there are changes coming down the pipe. We've been dealing with a lot of different pieces of legislation in cabinet meetings and our committees of cabinet over the last little while to encourage people to get back to work. Let's put it that way. And so we'll have more news on that coming when the legislature resumes next week.
That's good news. That's great to hear. Yeah, I think that's it from me, Jill. And I just wanted to thank you. I look forward to seeing you tonight at the Business Achievement Awards. It's going to be great to celebrate business excellence. And, thank you for the candid discussion today about energy, which I know you're very passionate about, but also some of the other issues that businesses are facing here in the Quinte region. So thank you. It was a wonderful opportunity to catch up on the issues.
Super. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Small Business Week.
Safe travels.
Thanks. Bye-bye.